Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met in New Delhi on Monday in what Netanyahu hailed as the beginning of a new era of friendship between the two nations. 9 bilateral agreements were signed as part of the meetings, including in the fields of oil, gas, renewable energy and cyber cooperation. According to Israeli media reports, among the issues discussed between the two leaders were greater recognition of Israel's status as a strategic partner of India and an increase in trade and investments by India in Israel. In addition, the advancement of security deals and regional security issues were also discussed. Benjamin Netanyahu thanked Modi for his exceptional friendship and hospitality and said he was deeply moved by the ceremony honoring his visit. The Prime Minister called his Indian counterpart a revolutionary leader who had revolutionized the relationship between the two nations. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the India-Israel joint statement. Joining me on the program today are Harsh V. Pant, Head of ORF Strategic Affairs; Virendra Gupta, former diplomat; Alok, Bansal, Director, India Foundation; and KV Prasad, Associate Editor of the Tribune. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you, of course. What were the highlights for you as far as the joint statement was concerned?
Well, it identified areas of cooperation, and as Prime Minister himself said that there are certain focus areas such as agriculture and water resources. An agreement between Indian Oil and the Israeli counterpart for research in solar thermal. And I think that is extremely important from the standpoint of India's own very ambitious targets and Prime Minister's International Solar Alliance. So a number of agreements covering very diverse areas. And I think attempt is being made to provide a very broad degree of institutional framework for the relationship to prosper. This happens between any two countries which have the kind of relationship that has evolved between India and Israel. I think the most important thing is that this relationship has come out of the closet, and we are exhibiting the requisite confidence to be able to talk about it, to create or provide a profile to this relationship. This relationship has developed over the years, in the last 25 years.
Sure.
So it is not something that has happened overnight. It is not something that has happened only in the last 2 or 3 years. It has happened progressively, but we are, in keeping with our general assertiveness and confidence in dealing with international relations issues, we are now showing greater degree of confidence and pragmatism in what everybody says dehyphenate.
Sure.
But basically what it means is that we deal with issues on their own merits.
And individually. Sure. You know, Alok Bansal, like the ambassador has just said, India has come out of the closet as far as its relationship with Israel is concerned. He said, how is India going to benefit from this, coming out of its stated departure from its, from its ties with Israel?
See, 9 MOUs were signed, if you look at it. In fact, and the statements made by the two prime ministers, there were a lot of win-win situations. In fact, a lot of things which were very important. And India-Israel relationship till now was premised only on defense and security cooperation, where we had a very, very robust cooperation for a number of years now. One thing which Prime Minister said, that we are going to eliminate red tape to allow Israeli companies to come and invest in India and set up joint production facilities. This is what is very important, because Israel has the technology. It's a small country. India has a huge market. Leveraging this huge market with their technological capacities, they could set up joint production facilities where they could not only supply to India, but leverage India's huge market as to set up facilities which could be used as exporting to third countries. So one is, of course, defense and issues, but incidentally, none of the 9 MOUs discussed with these issues. But the issues which were involved were, one was people-to-people contact, which people have been talking. And as you know, the Israelis tourists coming to India have consistently increased. In fact, I was talking yesterday to former Indian ambassador to Israel, and he said that after that compulsory military service, which in Israel for every Jewish boy it's 3 years, and
Yeah.
for a Jewish girl it is 2 years. After that, 60% of them come to India.
The hills especially.
Because in this particular world, today, you have, India is one of the very few countries where Israelis feel completely safe. And you will find these Israeli tourists in all remote corners of India. You go to Havelock Island in Andamans, you go to Valley of Flowers in Uttarakhand, you go to Kullu Manali in Himachal, you go to Ladakh and beyond in Jammu and Kashmir. So all these places, and they are not like normal tourists who come for 2-3 days. They come there, stay for about 15, 20, 30 days. So these tourists are very, very important from India's point of view. But on the other hand, Indian tourists visiting Israel have been rather limited. There have been only 2 types of tourists who have been going to Israel. One is, of course, business tourists, because a lot of collaboration is taking place. Second were religious tourism, Christians going to Bethlehem, Jerusalem, etc. And certain amount of Baha'is going to their headquarters in Haifa. One of the impediments was there was no direct link between Delhi and Tel Aviv. Of course, Mumbai had a link with it. Now, air traffic MOU has been signed, so that should bring in. Then, of course, agriculture is what Netanyahu said, that we have specialized in precision agriculture.
Yes.
And I think India is now at the juncture where we are waiting for another green revolution. And I think if we can, Israel can help us to get, because still a substantive chunk of Indian population is dependent on agriculture for livelihood.
Talking about agriculture, Professor, how does Israel fit into our scheme of things when it comes to agriculture especially?
Well, Israel, among other areas where it has developed cutting-edge technology, it has developed an ecosystem, in particular with regard to agriculture, where it looks at very efficient utilization of whatever resources it has. And I think that allows us to tap into its technology to raise our productivity in agriculture, which is, I think, a key question facing India and Indian agriculture at this point. So I think there are key areas where India can benefit in terms of tapping into the agricultural ecosystem that Israel has created. And of course, there is water, there is, how do you, what sort of irrigation facilities you can create, water desalination. So there are a range of issue areas around agriculture and agriculture related aspects, which perhaps is something that we look towards Israel, we should look towards Israel, and Israel is willingly offering it to us. So I think this is again a win-win situation for both the countries as we move forward to moving away from this defense and security dominance discourse that we have had.
Was it high time that we moved away from?
Absolutely, and I think this is something that we have been now talking about, even when the Indian Prime Minister visited Israel. The idea was that you need to move beyond this defense-centric discussions, because after all, you cannot have a mature, long-lasting relationship with a country primarily based on defense and security cooperation. You need more stakeholders into this, and I think that's where when you're talking of people-to-people contacts, when you're talking of Indian film industry, when you're talking of agriculture, and when you're talking of innovation in particular, I think you are bringing in stakeholders which will make this relationship longer lasting than possibly at this point we have.
So we are looking beyond defense and technology, and that's the way forward is what you're suggesting. Coming back to the joint statement now, KV Prasad, what is the significance of it really? What is the message?
Well, I think it shows very clearly that India and Israel have decided to take the strategic partnership on a much more wider scale than moving away primarily. All the time we used to look at Israel from the prism of defense and security. Of course, you have cyber security, which is added, which of course is the new thing, but in the sense of focus area. But largely, we're moving into other sectors where larger number of people get affected. They get into that. Agriculture, of course, 38 centers of excellence already working. I'm told 7 of them came up in the last 7 months. So, and tomorrow, I think when the Prime Minister goes to Mr. Netanyahu and Modi go to Gujarat, they're going to open a center for the palm dates somewhere in Gujarat from a distant area. So all these are several things. But one thing that people always look at, the issue of the two-state solution did figure out. If you look at it, and that's very important because this came very close to the last vote we've done in the UN. And today in the post-event briefing, it was mentioned that India and Israel decided to move and take the relationship forward and should not get stuck on one issue. So I think that's very because this whole, in the backdrop of what happened in the UN, the vote, the way India voted, there were a lot of doubts at one point of time. but everything was set aside. I think this shows the manner in which both countries are looking at the relationship to mature and take it to a new level.
Would you agree with that, Ambassador? Issues like the UN vote are just going to be, you couldn't even possibly call it a hiccup, looking at the way ties stand at the moment between India and Israel. Even before Benjamin Netanyahu came to India, before he left from Israel, he said that is an issue that is not even going to come up. We are looking beyond the UN vote, is what he said. So are we witnessing a new era as far as India and Israel are concerned?
No, that vote has no significance at all between India and Israel relationship because we have chosen to advance the India-Israel relationship in the bilateral context. Look at all the imperatives in different areas and move forward. Now, earlier we had premised what we call calibrated relationship with Israel based on our unstinted support for Palestine. So somehow that support for Palestine was holding us back in terms of advancing our relationship. What we have done is that we have de-linked this whole issue. Now, very often, growing relationship with Israel, and there are people in Israel and also in India who begin to feel that now India will completely transform. That is not going to happen. India has principled support for the Palestinian cause. India supports an independent Palestine. India supports Palestinian aspirations to be met, their right to be in a separate, independent territory. So all of that is going to be there. Growing relationship with Israel does not mean that we will weaken our political support for Palestine. And I don't think there is any reasonable expectation in Israel. Both countries should derive satisfaction from the fact that there is, as Alok said, complementarity here.
Sure.
And both countries will now move forward to realize that relationship. Now, that hasn't come as a surprise because 25 years ago, when I opened the Indian embassy in Israel, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind. I mean, looking at in the first 6 months, we probably hosted about 4 or 5 chief ministers from India. So while there was some hesitation on the part of the federal government, the government headed by Narasimha Rao, but state governments and the people in general were very, very gung-ho about the kind of dividends. And it was not just security. At that time, security and defense relationship hadn't come in. What people were talking about at that time was agriculture and water resources, and a number of joint ventures were set up indeed, in fact, to tap Israeli experience in drip irrigation and advanced irrigation agricultural techniques.
Going back to a point that you made in your opening statement, you said that, we've come out of the closet as far as our relationship with Israel is concerned. How are we going to benefit from this open bonhomie?
Well, why have we done it? I mean, Israel and I heard about a strategic relationship. Now, strategic is a very loose term now. It is used to describe all kinds of relationships.
Sure.
I personally feel that both quantum and the quality is important. Now, in both these aspects, both these benchmarks, Israel qualifies to be a strategic partner. It is a reliable friend. It has provided us critical spares for the...
But we've been very coy about it in the past.
We have been. But today, we are open because this relationship serves our national interest.
Okay.
As Alok said, we need technology, and those technologies in critical areas, in our defense production area, in the agricultural area, which is extremely critical for India, which is matter of national security.
Right.
Water management. Now, water management apparently could be the most critical area of cooperation. To look at Israeli experience in water harvesting, water recycling, all of that has to be done in India.
Sure.
So there's so many different areas where we can benefit, solar energy, where we can benefit from collaborating with Israel in critical technology areas.
Sure. Let's widen the scope of the debate now. Alok Bansal, what implications is this close ties between India and Israel going to have for the region?
See, this is what I wanted to say, what Ambassador Gupta was telling, that we have come out of the closet. Why we have come out of the closet? I think the region is the changing geopolitical scenario in the region. In fact, a few decades ago, if you would have actually come out like this, there would have been a reaction in the region. Today, fortunately, unfortunately, I think everybody is with Israel. Saudis, UAE, our major trading partners or our major interests in the Gulf, they are virtual friends of Israel. So apart from our relationship with Iran, we have actually no challenges vis-a-vis Israel. Improving our relations with Israel are concerned. And as far as we are concerned, the benefits that are going to accrue are enormous. As I said, there is an inherent complementarity between Israel and India, virtually in every field. If you look at it, we are producing platforms, aircraft, tanks, ships. Israel has one of the best sensors, electronics, etc., which can be fitted onto that. We have an advantage in space research. That's why MOU has been signed, because we have been launching satellites. Israel, small country, doesn't have that sort of a launch facility, so we could probably complement there. As I said, tourism in last 15, 20, 25 years has grown one way, which is primarily grown from Israel to India. Now this Bollywood...
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around.
Probably also because of the security protocols that they have there in Israel.
Not really so much of security protocol. I have gone twice in last 1 year plus, and it's not such a overbearing security protocol, or it's not very frightening or something like that. But there are two reasons. One is, I think Israel has not been marketed well in India. And second is that there is an apprehension that this is a conflict-prone zone. So I think both these things get cleared when you have Bollywood cooperation, because Bollywood is India's one of the softest, one of the best tool of India's soft power. And I think Bollywood cooperation means Israel's wonderful beaches, etc., would be showcased to the Indian audience, and then you'll start seeing Indians going. And I think to complement that is the air traffic agreement which comes in. So all these agreements have been woven that one is linked with other is linked with other, so that we have greater cooperation.
So a lot of thought has gone into it, is what you're suggesting.
Undoubtedly. If you look at Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech where he talked of yoga, that yoga also is another, I think
Anytime
today...
you want to hold a yoga class, I will be there, is what he has said.
That's what I said. So yoga and Bollywood are India's two biggest tools as far as soft power diplomacy is concerned. That's what is my belief.
Sure.
And I think both were mentioned in this particular case. Of course, there are other issues like batteries, solar power.
Yeah.
All these issues came up which are of importance. We need to understand that today Israel has the second largest number of startups in the globe after US. Now, many of these small firms that I've interacted with, they come out with innovative products. Of course, bulk of them are security related, but non-security also. Now, these firms which have taken off have a certain market, but beyond a certain limit, once they have to grow, they need a bigger market.
Sure. All right. You know, Professor Pant, will China and Pakistan be closely watching what's happening in India with Benjamin Netanyahu here?
Well, I think they have been watching closely I mean, they watch everything that we do closely. So I don't think this is particularly special. But yes, I think you know, when you say, for example, that you know, there might be concerns about India doing certain things with Israel vis-a-vis our other partners in the Middle East. There are also concerns about Israel and China relations in certain quarters in India. So I think if the relationship stands on its own merit, then I think these concerns sort of can be dovetailed into that and assessed properly. So therefore, I think this idea that somehow, because there were some apprehensions that Israelis and the Pakistanis were coming together at some point in the past decade, I think you know, we cannot make a third country contingent on how we develop our relations with Israel. Similarly, I think this idea that what we are doing in the region should be contingent on how others should perceive us. I think long before, you know, decades back also, if you look at when India was very reticent in terms of its engagement with Israel, there were Arab countries that were perfectly fine in having relationships with Israel. So I think it is our lack of self-confidence that prevented us from engaging Israel. And I think that is now coming back, and we are dealing with Israel on its own merit. We are dealing with the region on its own merit. We often articulate that, look, we have three pillars. We have the Arab Gulf states, we have Iran, we have Israel, and we are trying to develop relations with all of them. So I think there are some complications, but by and large, if that's the largest strategy that almost all powers have used in the region.
Sure. You know, as the United States starts looking within the Trump administration is looking at America first, there's a void that is being left in this particular region. Do you believe India and Israel can come together and fill in that void which is being captured by China right now?
I think that perhaps can be one of the side effects of this relationship blossoming. because what we are witnessing not only in Middle East but in the larger sort of Asia Pacific, everywhere this is a big issue. What are Americans up to? And while Trump administration is giving conflicting signals about it, there is a sense that there is some change happening in the domestic politics in America that is proving very difficult for the domestic politicians to overcome. So most of them are looking inwards. This is a phenomenon that goes all the way back to Barack Obama, where he started looking inwards.
Sure.
There were much apprehension in what he's doing in the Middle East. The traditional alliances were breaking down. Trump has restored some of those alliances. I think there is now a sense of a Saudi, Israeli, American trifecta working out some sort of an arrangement there. But I think largely what we are witnessing is a region that is almost gaping for great power intervention. And we have seen, for example, Russians have become very ambitious in the Middle East. And China is filling the void economically. Almost all major powers in the region have very strong economic ties with China. So I think in that context, if you are looking at India and Israel working together, I think that would be beneficial for both of them, because there are enormous opportunities in India for Israel as well. Israel is also making a pivot to Asia,
sure,
and India is a very important part of that pivot.
Indeed, indeed. You know, KV Prasad, as far as the highlights go in this particular visit of the Israeli Prime Minister here to India, is there anything that we are missing? What is it that stands out?
Well, I think, Frank, the visit is just into the second day, if one may say so. And there's 4 more days to go, because there is a series of programs starting from tomorrow. His visit to Ahmedabad and Gujarat, Gandhinagar, back to India for Delhi for a event in Delhi. And then, of course, the big corporate and the Bollywood. I think there are segments of this thing which remain to be covered, which of course will unfold as things come up. And as you say, you have showcasing several aspects to this important segment engagement. Of course, there's already some chatter going on in the social media. Of course, there's a mention of terror and how India and Israel look at the whole thing. But specific references to Mumbai apparently is not there. There's already the chatter going on, maybe a mild one as at this point of time. Less people will start looking at from a fine-tooth comb and trying to see what exactly the things come in and did not figure in the joint statement. Of course, this is very early in the evening when the draft has just been out. The statement is just out. I think that's the way I put it.
Okay, all right. Quick closing comments now from all my guests, beginning with you, Ambassador. What does the future hold for these two countries?
Well, I'd like to say that our relationship has evolved, and we have to look at it in the bilateral context. I don't see much future. You asked a question about what India and Israel can do or fill the void. I don't think that is going to happen, because neither is there any capability nor is there any potential to do that. India doesn't have, we shouldn't be overreaching ourselves. And there are a lot of people suggesting that now India is getting sucked into US-Israel axis. First of all, that kind of axis doesn't exist. India has to carefully calibrate its relationship with Iran. Iran is an important pillar in our Middle East approaches, Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, we've had relationship with all these countries, but we can confidently progress our relationship further with Israel to serve our national interests. And I think that is the context in which we have to see it, not beyond that.
Alok Bansal.
See, India and Israel, as I said, we have complementarities, and Prime Minister Modi's Make in India can get a big thrust from Israel, because Israeli companies have a requirement of investing in a big country like us. They need a bigger market, especially in those companies which are working in defense and security sectors. So there is a chances of many of these companies coming in and investing. We are also looking at agricultural cooperation, solar energy, and of course we have traditional sectors like gems and jewelries, which continued even when we didn't have official relations. The gems and jewelry cooperation between India and Israel continued. What is important is that India's relations with Israel should not impact on India's relations with other countries, especially Iran, which is, as I said, important for us.
Professor Pant, MOUs signed. Are we going to deliver? Are we going to see any forward movement on these MOUs?
I think we are, because both countries are very serious about it. And I think what is important, what this visit signifies, is a certain normalization of Indo-Israeli relationship, that in a matter of a year, we have had 2 major bilateral high-profile visits. which shows that if you have two partners who are dealing with them very normally. So this is a normalization of this relationship.
A closing comment from KV Prasad.
Well, I think just taking it forward, what India would need to do is demonstrate that its ability to deliver, because this is something which many a time you hear, we undertake a lot of projects, we undertake a lot of stuff, but the delivery mechanism seems to be a bit laggard. Today, the Israeli ambassador written a piece in one of the dailies where he says that there was something which was promised in July. By January, Israel delivered. So that's the other side of the prison.
Delivery, timely delivery is very important, is what you're suggesting. All right, on that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from us. See you again next time.